Hi, I'm Owen Canfield with the Opinion Page here at the Oklahoman, joined as I am every Friday by Mike McNutt, our Chief Capital Correspondent, to talk about news of the day, or news of the week at the Capitol. Mike, always good to see you.
Good seeing you.
This is the start of just completion, I guess, of week 3, is that right?
Yes.
At the legislature. Once again, the budget was a big story. Just Thursday, yesterday, the governor and legislative leaders signed off on a budget deal that will get them through fiscal year 2010, the current fiscal year that ends June 30. Mm-hmm. And one of the major hangups was how to use the rainy day fund. Looks like the Republican leadership, who had wanted to try to carry over as much of that as possible for a year from now, kind of got what they wanted at the end. Am I right?
Yeah, it seems that was the big hang-up, was the reserve funds, how much should go from each pot. They had an agreement last month, and but they didn't know how much money was going to come from the rainy day fund, which is a state savings account built up over the past few years, or federal stimulus money, which is they spent about half of it for this current fiscal year, and they have about $700 million left for the remaining. They could use that. So, and also there's some cash state reserves that they can dig into. And the governor, as you mentioned, wanted to, his executive budget, which he submitted 3 weeks ago, wanted to spend like $484 million.
Right. Almost all of the rainy day fund.
There's about nearly $600 million in the rainy day fund. And use that up front, the fiscal year 2010 budget, spend $60 million in the 2011 budget, and then have about $43 million left in the pot. His thinking was, he was concerned the federal stimulus money, if the state used that first and then had money left over in a savings account, the feds might say, well, why don't you spend your own money first?
Right.
As you mentioned, the state legislative leaders did want to spend as much in the rainy day fund, so their idea was spend about $223.5 million this fiscal year, same amount for the 2011 fiscal year, which left about $149 million.
Generally, this time of year, you're kind of rocking and rolling along and not having to deal with money issues. This year has been very much different because of the financial crisis. And so now the work begins on forging a 2011 fiscal year budget. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
What will happen next week is, of course, the legislature should pass these money bills.
Right.
Should be on the governor's desk by a week from now. They need to get that because this agreement includes supplemental funding for several agencies, especially the Department of Public Safety, which is facing furloughs for troopers and their employees, and corrections. Right. This won't solve all the corrections problems. There'll still be some furloughs apparently, but it will solve the Department of Public Safety, so they want them to furlough troopers. So they have to get that done by March 1st.
Perfect segue, DPS, into item 2 today, which is the Highway Patrol, or DPS, sort of retooling a few things and finding ways to save what they're saying would be about $4 million a year by doing a number of things, including one that's kind of interesting, I think, to just most motorists, is the fact that they're going to go to just all black cruisers now instead of black and white. They've had black and whites forever. Everybody knows them, they see them. Right. But by using black vehicles, you're saving $700 a car, which adds up over time.
Sure, that will result in them being able to buy 4 to 5 new cars a year. And these are painted at the factory, black and white, and to meet the patrol's signature identification. Now they just come out in black, sort of like the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office. They'll be on Dodge Chargers. Many people have seen those driving up down the highway. They'll have the lights on. They'll still have the Highway Patrol signs on the doors. But they looked at ways that they could save money. And originally, years ago, these Highway Patrol would trade in cars 70,000 to 100,000 miles once they get on their vehicles. Right. Now they're driving vehicles much longer mileage. They've got about 60 vehicles with 150,000 miles. So you can buy 4 or 5 new vehicles. That would help a lot. And I think what happened with Patrol is an example of how a legislator who's a chairman of an appropriations subcommittee really gets in his hands and looks at that agency. And he and the Public Safety Commissioner, Kevin Ward, along with Randy Terrell, State Representative from Moore's, chairman of the House Subcommittee on Public Safety and Judiciary. They've been working on this for about 2 or 3 months. Right. And they basically went through and looked at everything. They're restructuring the entire patrol troop. They're taking more people from aircraft to patrol, weights and checks on trucks, other non-law trooper enforcement, speeding enforcement, putting about 24 more troopers on the road. Right. And also selling some aircraft that's been hanging around, and also increasing the number of troopers in the commercial truck regulations. Right. because those fees, once they get to a certain amount, that goes back in the public safety department.
Right.
So that's what they're looking at.
Well, it's encouraging to see an agency be willing to look at itself like that.
Right.
In these
And it
times.
takes an agency and,
Right.
and legislators really digging it together and finding
That's right.
things. And if every agency did that, that would help the agency.
Well, there's
probably.
$4 million just in OHP.
Right.
And so you wonder how many other savings can potentially be made out there. Last item of the day, a bill that was approved yesterday in the state Senate that would make dates of birth for public employees basically off limits to open records requests. Now that's a big deal for the media. We need those, or at times need those, to differentiate between the Mike McNutt who maybe works at the Oklahoman and the Mike McNutt who lives in Enid and is no relation, but one of you is in trouble. We're trying to figure out which is which. That date of birth allows us to do that. Legislators have said in the Senate, it was passed 44-0, have said, no, that's it's a slippery slope. It leads to, potentially makes it easier for people to have their identity stolen and all that. At 44-0 in the Senate would make someone think, well, that's a slam dunk, it's going to get passed. Any guess on what's going to happen down the road with this thing?
Oh, I think it's what they call down at the Capitol a work in progress. It'll go over to the House, and Randy Terrell is the House author. And visiting with him yesterday, basically said he wanted to take control of that bill and work with Senator Lethbridge, who's the Senate author. But his concern is he thinks there should be some type of balance, some type of compromise, because we were able to work out. He understands that if a state employee is suspended or under some type of, or charged with a crime, that once that occurs, then I think he wants media and the public to make specific requests. What he's concerned about is what he calls fishing expeditions. That, and he's really concerned about correctional officers, troopers, who might offend somebody. You know, a correctional officer offends an inmate. Inmate tells his buddies on the outside. They do a search, and with a, I don't know if they get an identity theft as much as they could probably find out maybe where that person lives, and get more information that they wouldn't have. And so that's the question and debate that will be going on in the House, and they might be able to work it out this session, or maybe something that may carry on to next year.
Well, they're sure to hear from every newspaper in the state as this thing goes along, including the Oklahoman. Mike, thanks a million for your time as always. We appreciate you watching today and encourage you to join us each week here on News OK and to read Mike's stories every day in the Oklahoman.